This is the Michael Brighton Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Health Series, and I'm joined with Julie Vincent, who is a mindset and wellness coach, yoga, meditation teacher on a mission to help women find transformative wellness and joy. So, Julie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I thought that we'd start with the idea of enjoying the process because so many people try to force themselves to do certain things. So, why is joy important?
Well, I think as the world gets more intense and the pressures stack up on our shoulders, joy is something we all really desperately need to be well, but we don't often take time for or maybe even know how to create as adults in particular. I think joy is often incorrectly seen as a luxury. And I believe it's actually the secret ingredient for wellness routine. If you focus on all the rest of the aspects of wellness, but you don't have joy in your life, then really what's the point?
That's a good point. And it's almost like when you picture enjoying something like exercise or eating or even just trying to sleep, that sort of thing, that becomes your experience of life in a way. Like if you don't like every day, then you don't like your life. So it seems like the most important thing is to do things that you do like so that you start to like your life while you're trying to be healthy as well.
Exactly. And the point that I always try to drill home with the people I work with is it doesn't have to be extravagant things. I think most often people think of joy as something that's like a vacation or some huge adventure or something like that. And I believe that you can drip joy into your days with little small daily rituals, things that, are even as simple as taking pauses, introducing mindfulness into your life, really being present with what already exists, and just finding little things that you can appreciate with gratitude that bring that feeling of joy into every day.
What are some of the main benefits of this? I mean, I'm thinking outside of just being consistent, I imagine you'd be more consistent with something if you enjoyed it, but what other benefits are there?
Well, I think, clearly there is a mind body connection. When you feel joy, your body starts to feel better. So you get benefits physically as well, where you feel more relaxed. And then you're more likely to have more energy, which creates motivation. And, it's sort of one of those ripple effects in your life. I think, when you have gratitude and presence, then that helps you really just have a more well-rounded feeling of well-being. And there's research out there that says that, joy is really helpful for just our well-being in general.
Are there any little things that people can do that can help to add joy into things? So I really hate running. It's one of the things that I really don't like doing. But if I listen to music, then it
Yeah.
seems to go over easier. Or if I think, right, well, maybe I can't run on a treadmill, but I could run outside. That
That's
might help with that as well. So what are some of the little things that people can do to make things more enjoyable?
that's such a great question and point. I think that that's the easiest way for us to add joy into our lives. So yes, like we can't just sort of say, I don't want to work and I'm just going to live a joyful life and I'm going to do everything I want all day long, right? We as adults have responsibilities. We might have children, partners, pets, to take care of. And so we have to go on living our days with our responsibilities. And so I sort of help people look at it through the lens of how can I add a little something in that will to something that I'm already doing, right? So music is a great thing that I always recommend. So, if you're doing the laundry or making dinner, like putting on your favorite jam and dancing around, or even just singing to it, listening to it, that creates a lot of more of that happy feeling while you're doing something that you already have to be doing. Um, little trips of joy as well, in ways like, for example, carpooling. I'm listening to a podcast or I'm listening to music, or I'll call a friend while I'm doing that. So that it's not just me driving to and from somewhere or sitting in the car waiting for my son to be done with soccer, but I'm using that time in a way that feels like I'm doing something for myself, that makes me feel good. Maybe I'll go for a walk while I'm waiting for, a kid to be done with an activity. So things like that um, are really beneficial, just to sort of think about how can you stack something with something that you already have to do.
It's interesting that you brought up self-care as well, because let's say you never really make time for yourself. Does that affect your level of joy and happiness, I guess, when you're trying to be healthier?
Absolutely. I think self-care is so incredibly important, especially as a parent. I think, if we're not taking time for ourselves and we're just constantly overscheduled with other people's plans and things that we want to make sure we're doing for others, then even if it's for work, in your career, we're not taking time for ourselves, then we're really not focusing on our own wellness, right? So self-care is so important when you think about holistic wellness. And I think, self-care includes things like setting boundaries and saying, like, I can't overschedule things for other people and my time and give too much away. I need to make sure that there's things that I do for myself in my days and in my weeks. And it could be something as, small as making sure every morning you take time before you go on and do other things, or every evening, making sure you take a break in the middle of the day to mindfully have your meal or go for a walk and get out in nature. It doesn't have to be things that take an incredible amount of time or that are expensive. It can be things that are simply just things that make you feel good. And I love to help people define self-care and kind of make a little bit of a menu. So helping you think about, like, what's something you can do in 5 minutes, what's something you can do in 15 minutes, what's something you can do with 30 or even an hour or more, and have sort of like a go-to menu so that when you do have those little blocks of time, you'll be able to reference it. You start by keeping it in your phone, and then eventually you just have it memorized, and you can start to say, okay, I've got 30 minutes. What would I like to do with this time? Would I like to sit down and read outside, or would I like to call a friend, or so on?
Do you find that this helps in other areas as well? So if you're able to take some time out for yourself, what are the other consequences or implications of that?
I think, if you take time for yourself, then you can start to develop interests in new things. You could develop a hobby. You could, do a new activity. You could make new friends. You could, get involved in your community, whatever it is for you individually that makes you feel good, right? So it's it also just creates a sense of enjoyment in your life when you are able to focus on yourself, and there's people who are in all different sort of parts of the spectrum of self-care and the amount of time they spend on it. And I think for people that are experts at it, they kind of have developed a hobby, and they have things that they do for themselves that really make them feel joy and peace and relaxation. And maybe if you're starting on the other side where you really don't do this much, it's how do you just, like I said, drip little things in? So kind of like the idea of dripping joy, it could be like dripping in time, little bits of breaks, relaxation. Maybe you listen to a mindful meditation. Maybe it's that you watch your favorite show for 30 minutes. Whatever it is that just makes you feel relaxed and helps you release anxiety, release stress, release tension in your day, focus on yourself and not someone else, and that really just brings you this feeling of self-love, which, is super fundamentally important for wellness.
One of the reasons why I brought that part up really, Julie, is I found my decision making and some other people's decision making different based on how they're feeling. I'm talking things like if you're stressed out, then you may eat to reduce that. If you're anxious and worried about something, you're less likely to make the healthy or effective choice, and you're likely to go down the other route instead. So I wonder if you can shed some light on that for the listeners as well around your emotional state affecting things like your decision making.
Absolutely. So I always say, we always have choice. There's always a choice, right? And oftentimes when you're overwhelmed and you're serving others so much and not yourself, then you're not thinking about your own choice in the matter. And you kind of lose yourself and you create a life that's, really not aligned with how you want to feel. And so when you do introduce self-care practices into your life, you're bringing some of that choice back, which is, really fundamentally important for how you feel on the day-to-day basis. And you're right. I think oftentimes when we're kind of running on the treadmill, on autopilot and doing things for others and not taking care of ourselves, we tend to make choices that are rushed. We tend to make choices that might be better for someone else and not ourselves. And where does that lead? It doesn't lead to feeling well, right? So that affects your mindset. It might give you more anxiety, it give you more stress. So, it's fundamentally important for your mental well-being, to take care of yourself for sure.
I like the idea of the menu as well. Like you've got multiple choices based on how much time that you have that you can do for yourself or do things that make you happy and feel good that then lead to hopefully better decisions down the road. But what I wonder is some of the reasons why this doesn't happen. So why don't people do things for themselves or things that make them feel good? Why wouldn't someone do something like that?
Oh, that's a great question. I find that oftentimes it's, goes back to sort of like the way we were raised, our foundational beliefs about self, about what we should be doing, the shoulds in our life, maybe social pressures, the way that we work with our partner, the way we think about we should be as a parent. These are all sort of like beliefs that we've grown up some way, shape, or form. We develop this sense of self, right? And so some of that is outside of our control and it's subconscious. And so when I work with people, I help, sort of bring awareness to that through mindfulness practices, through questioning, and bring that to the surface so that we can determine, like, are there beliefs that are no longer serving us? And when we can determine what they are, we can figure out how to break through that and create new beliefs and new habits and rituals that support those beliefs. So, but sometimes it's not an easy thing. People just don't default to believing that they're worthy of self-care. And, I think these practices of mindfulness, awareness, and talking it out can really help with, developing this new sense of self that's more aligned with the life that they want to live.
Do you find that that can have bigger implications as well? Like if you think of someone that might want to make changes or make the adjustments, if they don't think that they're worthy of being happy, or maybe they have these voices of, oh, well, you're selfish if you're taking time out for yourself, that sort of thing. Do you find that that can also make it difficult to change it? Like, although you're unhappy, although you're struggling, it's the same thoughts and feelings and self-talk that's causing you to not actually change and you end up staying where you are then.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, and that's why I think like coaching helps. Sometimes social support helps. So working like in a small group and realizing like you're not alone, that you're thinking that. I work with a lot of mothers, and I've found when we get together with a group of moms that they share some of these things, that these shoulds, and feeling like they feel like they need to be doing something, and everybody else says it. And when that happens, it sort of opens up this idea of like, oh, I'm not alone. It sounds like, more people feel this way and we all want to change. So I feel the support to do that, versus sort of feeling alone sometimes on your journey. And like you don't have the support you need to make the changes. Um, which can be difficult, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's almost like the solution to feeling healthier, possibly losing a bit of weight if you need to, it's not as simple as people make out. Like it's not so easy, it's not so straightforward. Everyone has their own reasons why they can't do it. Sometimes they're valid, sometimes they're not. But I don't think we can discount everything. I don't think we can just say, oh, well, that's not necessarily the case to absolutely everything. Sometimes the problem is actually the problem that they need to solve. And very often people can forget that if you hate it, if you don't enjoy it, that has bigger problems or bigger things that can go wrong than simply, okay, well, now I simply don't feel healthy anymore. Or
Exactly.
I start to get knee pain or whatever. Like the problems are so much bigger than just I'm just trying to be healthier.
That's right. And I've had people come to me saying, like, I want to lose the baby weight or something like that. And we'll go on the journey through nourishment and nutrition, talking all about that and kind of what they eat and all that things. But what ends up coming up isn't about the food, it really isn't generally. And I think, that sort of goes back to what I was talking about with the beliefs and all of that. Like, I feel like I need to work out so hard. I feel like I need to do this like cycling class that makes me sweat like crazy. And I feel exhausted after that. Or I feel like I need to eat like a bird or do some sort of detox for 5 days. And oftentimes, what it is they need a little bit of self love, they need a little bit of self care. And so that's why I think it's helpful to talk it out with people when you're on your journey, because it's really important to realize that the way you're thinking about something isn't necessarily the truth, right? It's the story you create in your head. It's what your beliefs are telling you you should be doing versus really like relaxing a little bit about it and not feeling so stressed. Because the cortisol in your body, helps you make different decisions that might not actually be aligned with your goal. So I really do find that the holistic perspective, especially on something like weight loss, is really important to meet your goals.
Do you have any quick things that people can, I guess, refer to when it comes to some habits? So the way that I'm thinking is when it comes to money and finances, some people say you want a hobby that you enjoy, a hobby that makes you money, that sort of thing. So it's more about the actions that lead to the outcomes. So when you think about, okay, maybe something that can help us relax might be a good one to have. What other boxes, I guess, would you suggest people try to tick with their actions, their joyful actions?
I really believe in visualization for goals. And so if you have a hard time with, trying to infuse more joy into your life, like, can you start with just imagining it? Can you start with sitting for a moment and really visualizing yourself doing these joyful things? What are those things? Can you really dream about them? And envision your life in that way and start to think about it in your own mind before you actually start to do something. I think creating that vision in your head and those beliefs are really, really powerful before you start a habit. And I always say for me, it's really like the 1% kind of thing, like just tiny little drips of change lead to something that is going to give you momentum to make something that's much bigger happen. So instead of trying to like completely shut off doing something, say no, and then say yes to something new, or completely adopt a new habit, starting tomorrow, I'm going to eat this way or run 5 miles, like that rarely works in the long term. So really being more mindful and aware of like your habits as something that's just compounding, and it's going to grow and you're going to increase your motivation by doing things slowly and allowing yourself to take it slow and giving yourself permission to approach things that way. That's going to be a lot more joyful than trying to sort of like cut things off and start something new and have like a pretty aggressive climb towards a goal.
Do you find that sometimes we we lean towards a certain thing to make ourselves feel good, and yet sometimes we may be discounting something that may help more. So, like for instance, I quite enjoy playing sport, and I find that that is quite good for me feeling good, also helps me lose weight. But yet, sometimes I have a hard time doing things that help me relax, even though that also probably helps. What suggestions do you have for people that are in that situation where they're favoring one thing that helps over something else that would also help?
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, I mean, I think you have the awareness of it already, right? Some people don't have that awareness. So really like thinking about sitting down and saying like, what is it that I do in my week that brings me joy? What is it that I do that makes me feel well? And whether it's writing down in your journal or mapping it out on a sheet of paper, um, really figuring out kind of where the holes are, so you already have the awareness of the whole. Some people might need to start before that. But once you have the awareness, it's all about like, how do you drip some of the things in? So it's not like, okay, now I need to spend a bunch of time playing sport and then also spend a bunch of time relaxing. But it's like, what could you do before or after your sport that relaxes you? you know? Or if you don't play sport one day, can you do something that relaxes you the next day? And just thinking about kind of how can you balance that out a little bit and drip some things in that would bring in that feeling of relaxation in your life.
I completely agree with that. And I also find that being able to have something that is for joy, relaxation, is for mindfulness, almost like adding to that menu that you mentioned before,
Right.
that can make a difference because otherwise you're doing loads of things that lead to the same outcome rather than having things that are a little bit more well-rounded.
That's right. hmm I, wake up every single morning and I do my mindfulness, meditation, visualization, gratitude practice before I even get out of bed. And that works for me because I know that that's fundamentally important to my mental well-being. And so I do it first thing. I also find that it helps me create the day that I want versus kind of running right into the day. I always joke with parents, like, do you want your kid running in and waking you up and sort of like, oh my gosh, like that kind of feeling? Or do you want to set your alarm early and wake up on your own, even if it's for 5 minutes, right? It's a completely different start to your day. So I think it's important to, find the times that work for you in your schedule to, really put pieces of the things that you want in your day.
It seems like being able to do that can lead to then better decisions later on, but not having enough time can be something people use, whether it's an excuse or a definite reason. There is only so many hours in a day.
Right.
How do you help people balance things out, fit everything in, make time for these things when time can be a barrier for some people? And also sometimes that can actually lead to more stress and more struggle when you think, okay, well, maybe I'll do this meditation over here, but now all of a sudden I'm 20 minutes late for everything because I've not
Right.
done anything around it to make it easier to do. So share your some thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it's a really common concern and sometimes excuse. I think it really depends on your schedule. There's people who are like completely scheduled with their days every single day. There's people who don't have that at all. So it's different approaches for different people, completely personalized. But I think in general, when you're a really, really busy person, boundary setting becomes very important. So, for example, if you're someone who has a full-time job and also a parent, your schedule's probably looking like back to back from 6 or 7 in the morning until, you go to bed at night. Depending on the age of your kid, they might be up past you at this point. So how do you figure out how to add the self-care and the fitness and all of that into your world is really, really important. And I like to recommend that you look at your calendar on a weekly basis and you schedule it. So you say, where are the openings? Where is something that I can say no to if I don't have an opening? Have I said yes to too many things this week? And if so, is there anything I can pass off? Or is there anything I can say no to maybe next time? And create little pockets of time. It doesn't have to always be an hour. It could be 5 minutes, 15 minutes. Putting something scheduled on your calendar, blocking off time every single day for 15 minutes, at 10 a.m. to ask yourself, am I hungry? Have I been drinking water? Can I, take 5 minutes to just breathe, go outside, look at nature, take a quick break? That really works well for a lot of people. But it fundamentally comes back to giving yourself permission to do that, so that sort of links back to the beliefs work, the self-worth work that I do with people, and making sure that they feel like they have the permission to take care of themselves throughout the week and not always say yes to everyone else. Because what ends up happening is that over time, when you're constantly doing things for others and you're not scheduling in time for yourself, that leads to burnout and overwhelm, which is something that is really common these days, and talked about a lot because it's become a really big problem because people can't really get out of that spiral very easily. So I think the work is, how do you have mindfulness throughout your week and awareness of the things that you want to be doing, and make time for that so that you don't reach the burnout cycle and you, kind of live in a better balanced kind of well-being.
Julie, thanks so much for joining me today, discussing helping people find more joy and happiness and health as well. I think being able to take that kind of approach to things can make a world of a difference. So for those that want to enter your world, Julie, and try and get to know you a little bit more, maybe take advantage of some of the things that you have going on, how can they do that?
So you can find me on Instagram at I am Julie Vincent, or you can check out my website, clearspaceforjoy.com. And that's got all the information about how to work with me, from one-to-one to my mindful book club that I offer monthly, and also corporate wellness and speaking.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Julie, thanks so much, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much.